G'day, g'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis podcast, where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro, and I've got a couple of people on today to talk about something which has happened very recently. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for, I don't know, maybe the past year, a few days ago, the outcome of one of the most momentous, monumental elections ever was decided. It was the establishment and the deep state and all the entrenched bureaucrats up against everyday people. And for once, the side of the everyday people won and succeeded. Now, I'm not talking about the US election and Donald Trump. I'm actually talking about the Victorian Council elections, where the two gentlemen who are joining me today were elected to the Surf Coast Shire Council, much to the chagrin of all the woke lefties and greenies who have previously inhabited this council. So welcome to the show, Paul and Joel. How are you, fellas?
Thank you, Pietro. Thanks for having us.
Pietro, thank you.
Now, Paul, we've met before and we've spoken before, and we spoke prior to the council elections. I think most of our viewers, if they are big followers of the show, have a good idea of who you are. So I'll let them go back to previous episodes if they want to know more about you. But Joel is the first time it's your first time on the show. So why don't you give us a bit of an introduction of who you are?
Right. I'm a resident of Torquay. I've been down in the Surf Coast for 21 years. Moved down here for work. I'm a chiropractor. So I've been working mostly in Colac is my primary practice, which is just the other side of Winchelsea. I'm a candidate for the Winchelsea ward. In that time, I've also had practices, or satellite practice here in Torquay, and another practice in Geelong West. So that sort of triangulated pretty much all of the Winchelsea wards. So I've had a lot of dealings with the community through work. Also been heavily involved in my son's community sport. So that led me to be president of the local athletics club and president of Geelong Athletics Centre, Little Athletic Centre. So yeah, we were involved with that for about 10 years as well. Yeah, so just a regular Joe, chiropractor. Never really been involved in politics up until the whole COVID period, when realised that even if you're not interested in politics, politics is interested in you. So that's sort of what got me active.
Yeah, right. So we were just chatting before. You'd previously been a supporter of Paul's for council, and Paul had initially got you to take a look into, I guess, how dire the situation was in the council area. So, I mean, tell me a little bit about your decision to choose to run for council.
Right. I guess just speaking with people through work and social connections, I found that there was uh, a voice that wasn't being heard, and the majority opinion in the community wasn't being represented in the council. So I started attending council meetings. That's how boring my life was the last 6 to 8 months. And yeah, there was a definite imbalance in the council makeup. Paul and another councillor, Heather Wellington, basically two people basically representing in the Shire, and seven that weren't. So seeing the frustrations that Paul was going through, different chats I had with him, I decided that with my connections in the community, I could probably be successful, and yeah, turned out to be so.
Sorry, your audio cut out for me for a minute. You were saying that the views that weren't being represented. I only missed a few words. What were the views that weren't being represented?
Well, I guess there's lots. um, uh, I think the biggest trigger was there was a push to ban duck hunting in the Shire. That on top of, which is a state legislation issue, that on top of the council being heavily involved in the Voice campaign, which is a federal issue, accepting petitions on international issues with regards to Israel and Gaza, totally outside the realm of, excuse me, what the council can do and achieve. So loss of focus on local issues, and also when it came to local issues, not supporting what the majority of the people were expecting.
Fair enough. I'm with you. And yeah, Paul and I spoke to no end about how ridiculous we think that whole stuff about, having a say on foreign issues and having a say on federal issues and just doing everything other than the purview of what council is meant to do. And obviously you guys feel the same, back to basics. I like the idea a lot. Now, Paul, congratulations. Yes. You're back in. You've done it again, and you've roped some other people in with you this time.
Yes.
I believe 3 of the Back to Basics team of 4 got in and were elected.
Yep. First up, I would just like to pull Joel up on something. He is no longer the candidate for Winchelsea, but he is the councillor-elect. So until he swears in, he is no longer candidate. He's not yet councillor, but he's councillor-elect.
So, I mean, tell me about the people who have gotten elected and how, I suppose, how different does the makeup of the council look now? So prior, we spoke, there's 9 councillors, I believe, for Surf Coast, 3 for each of the 3 wards. Yeah. And it was very much you, the lone voice, against 8, and at times you had 1 on your side. By the end, you had one other councillor on your side. Did that councillor get re-elected?
No, so Heather Wellington has retired. Okay. She was a great level of support. We didn't agree on everything, but when it came to the remit of council and focusing on core services, we were in lockstep there. So It's disappointing that she chose not to run again, but she's at a point in life that she wants to focus on family. So she's more than welcome to do that. It's just a little bit disappointing that we've had this paradigm shift in the makeup of council that she won't actually be able to benefit from it. But the result is what it is. And yeah, the power balance has shifted dramatically. And there's a range of independent voices on council who will ultimately end up dictating the direction that we head, because there's pretty much a nexus of 3 from the left, 3 from the right, and 3 others that are variable.
And you don't know anything. I mean, I guess you'll know more as we get closer, but you can tell sometimes a little bit from their descriptions whether they are vaguely back to basics type people, or not necessarily back to basics, but rates, roads, rubbish, that sort of stuff. We don't know anything about those in between candidates yet, or we can't guess.
There's some indications, but that's all going to play out this week. So on Thursday we elect the mayor, and there'll be discussions prior to that, which I'm actually quite disappointed in. Like, the Surf Coast residents and ratepayers have elected the councillors, and then the councillors elect the mayor. So if you're going to, there's no perfect solution. Everyone, hopefully, most of your viewers understand trade-offs. No perfect solution, but I would have liked some element of the community to contribute to the election of the mayor, whether that's in part or full. Just the way the situation is at the moment, it can create the perception of backroom deals, because really that's how it happens. Like, I'd much rather the discussions that we have between councillors be in public so that everyone can see what was going on.
Is there any, feel free not to answer, is there any chance of a back to basics person being in the conversation for mayor?
Yes.
I like to hear that. Let's go no further. Let's speculate no further. We don't want to jinx it. We'll knock on all the wood that we can find, gentlemen.
Yes.
All right. That is exciting. That is exciting. That's a scoop. All right. So there is the chance for a back to basics person to be the mayor.
Yes.
All right. So tell me a little bit. This might be just interesting to me, and it might be interesting to no one else, but screw it. It's my podcast. I'm going to ask it. How was the process of the votes? Was it close? Did it rely on preferences? Were there moments we were winning, moments we were losing? Were there moments where it looked in doubt? Were there moments where it looked like we would get more? How was the either of you feel free to answer.
Joel, do you want to describe Winchelsea and I'll describe Torquay?
Yeah, sure. So there was 2 lots of vote counting. So the first half, I was in the lead. I think I had about 1,250 votes, somewhere around there. And then second place was Tony Phelps. He's an independent candidate. He was about 50 behind me. And I believe the two of the past councillors, Rose Hodge and Adrian Schonfeld, are about 300 behind me. And then who was behind that? The Greens councillor and another independent, Daryl Wilson, was, I think, another 100 behind them. So a reasonable lead in the first half. And then the second half, well, going on the first half, I knew that Alicia and Adrian were going to preference Alicia and Daryl were going to preference Rose and Adrian pretty heavily. So I figured I'd need to get a bit more of a gap from them to not get bumped out. So that was my concern. The second half of the preferences, second half of the votes when they were counted, it closed up a fair bit, and the Greens Council actually shot up into third position, I think. Is that right, Paul?
Yep.
I think so, yeah. So it was pretty close for the third spot. I believe Adrian just got in by about 30 or 40 votes ahead of the Greens councillor, with preferencing from Daryl. And I managed to stay ahead of them with some preferencing from Rose's second preferences as well. So I managed to I'm pretty sure I ended up in the top spot, followed by Tony and then Adrian.
Top spot, and Green not elected in fourth spot. That's about as good as that could end up, right? Paul, how was your?
Not only that, Pietro, but Joel on his first attempt led the charge, first elected, bumped the Greens, and also beat the 20-year councillor.
Do you want to run for the lower house for, I don't know, the Libertarian Party or anything, Joel? You're not thinking of doing something like that? We could use some of that good juju.
Not anytime soon, no.
That's exactly how I like my candidates. Reluctant, don't want to be a part of government, don't like dealing with government. We can work on it.
It's pretty much the same as when I was involved in Lil Athletics. It's always hard to get volunteers, and it's like, well, if no one else is doing it, okay, I'll put my hand up. So that's how I ended up president of Lil Athletics as well.
If only we had some politicians who didn't want to be there a bit more. Like, if only we had some more politicians who weren't career politicians there for 20 years and will die in office probably.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, how was your count?
Group A, number 1 was Liz Patterson, the sitting mayor. Number 2 was Rebecca Burke, the top of the ticket and back to basics candidate. And then I was number 3. Once the second round, Group B, first preferences were counted, I was then relegated to 4th, and the Greens candidate jumped above me, which led me into a situation walking into the VEC office when the provisional button push was done to distribute preferences, under the belief that I was probably not going to be elected, which was a little bit of a relief, but a little bit of me was a little bit sad to not be in a position to join Joel and Rebecca. But once preferences were distributed, our 4th candidate, Eric Minogue, he was the second excluded out of the count. And after the preferences flowed from the first exclusion and Eric, that resulted in me having a reasonable lead over the Greens candidate by about, about 240 votes, something like that. So it was a pretty substantial margin in the end after preferences. And that resulted in the former mayor getting elected, Rebecca on her first attempt, and myself in Torquay.
Are you telling me that another Green was knocked out by you, Paul?
Sorry, did you not want to hear that?
No, I did want to hear that. That's another Green. 2 Greens replaced by 2, I don't know, libertarian-minded individualists. I like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've got a unique situation where I was of the belief that there was a strong Green support base in the Surf Coast, but it's resulted in whatever they've done, the Greens have lost support, and we've changed a Labor Greens dominated council into one where there are now no longer any Green members.
Would you say that so the Surf Coast Council is given, and we're guessing a little bit because we don't know the makeup exactly of a lot of the independents and other councils, but are you positioned to be the most pro individual rights libertarian-esque council that there is in Victoria?
I think so. I'd not considered it in that regard, but it would definitely be top 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I did want to ask a little bit about I guess the process of running for council and campaigning and all the rest of it. I'll start with Joel. So, did you experience any like hostilities during the election, the campaign trail, the process of it all occurring?
I didn't at all. Maybe one or two online comments on community forum groups on Facebook, which weren't really directed at me, more directed at the group. And I tried to stay out of that as much as I could. But every one-on-one interaction I had was really positive the whole time. I joined in with a bit of volunteering at a local market in Winchelsea, and just getting to know people there. And I've had a set up 21-year career with a lot of the community from Winchelsea coming to see me at work. So they kind of know who I am and what I stand for and all that already. So there was a good base there to work with. And living in Torquay with our sons going to school and social and sporting groups, everyone was quite positive with me getting on board. So yeah, it was quite good in that respect.
The one-on-one doesn't surprise me, but often, the people who get to hide behind their keyboards with the online comments, usually there you see a bit more vitriol. But that's great. I mean, maybe that shows a bit of shifting in the tide of people being tired of the the lefty keyboard warriors that have previously plagued the councils. Paul, did you experience any hostility and stuff?
Yeah, but as a seasoned campaigner and elected representative, I've got a thick skin. But it was less than a handful of individuals that were throwing the shade on it. But if I was new to the environment, I probably would have been negatively affected by it. But I only really get affected by feedback from those that I care about. So,
yeah. Affected by it, but nowhere near as affected as we are by something, say, for example, I don't know, enormous taxes that we have to pay all the time. So,
correct.
In the order of things, it's far down the list. Do you think it was less than in the past? Like, if you had to draw a comparison, maybe for the first time?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I mean, you're a very known quantity in the area, not just for being a councillor in the past, but you also ran in the lower house.
State and Fed, so
your name is more well known, I guess, if they're going to take aim at someone. Maybe you are the number one name on the hit list. So Joel, this one I guess is more directed to you. Would you have run solo for this election if it had not been, if it had been assuming that the makeup of council would have been somewhat similar to the previous council?
Probably not. No, the comfort of knowing there was going to be a team there, or the potential of a team, was one of the major factors. And I said to Paul at the very start, if you're not going to be there, I don't want to be there. So the Wednesday night before that second round of votes came in, I was freaking out a little bit. So yeah, I'm rapt that we got the three of us in there and some other like-minded councillors as well. So yeah.
Was there ever a moment where it looked like it would just be you and neither Rebecca or Paul? Or was there always, I think you mentioned before, Paul, that Rebecca was always fairly safe. So you were always...
Rebecca was in a very strong position.
Yeah, okay. So, because I can imagine you would have been sweating some serious bullets if it was just going to have been you. Paul, would you have run again without a team? Like, would you have
Yes.
been willing to put yourself through the same?
Yes.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Because I'm playing the long game. Like with anything, you can take short-term wins for long-term losses. Let's say like eating a donut every day. Short-term win, it's lovely, but long-term you'll become obese. I'm much more of a fan politically, sport, socially, whatever, playing the long game.
Right.
Even if it means significant personal cost.
Well, fair enough. Is it a masochist? Someone who likes self-punishment? Is that the?
I think that's the term.
So, something of a masochist when it comes to involving yourself in political affairs. That's okay. Yeah. That's what we need. So I mean, Joel, I'll get to know you a little bit better. What of those life experiences that you've had, and you mentioned a little bit in your introduction, what is it that will impact you the most in the way that you're going to look to govern as a councillor, I suppose?
Impact me the most?
Yeah, so based on what you've come from, what is it that are the number one or number two, number three issues or skills that you've developed in the past, which will determine how it is that you're going to look to govern?
Well, I guess I'm not a strong public speaker, but I'm a very strong listener. That's been my career for the last 28 years, is listening to people and working towards getting practical outcomes. So that's sort of what I hope to bring. I do want to take politics out of council and, if we use a slogan, make council boring again, and just make sure they're just looking after the basics is the ticket we're running on, making sure all the infrastructure and the roads are up to scratch, and leaving all the identity politics and all that sort of stuff at the door. Because as I said earlier, I think that's what the majority are wanting, is just a council that's providing the basic services and leaving all that political stuff outside of council.
Yeah. So would you say, so that'll be the main difference? If someone who is, let's say someone who's voted you guys in and it does not pay as much attention to council as you have in the last year, or certainly as you have, Paul, what'll be the big differences that they'll notice about council? Will it be, so the back to basics stuff, what is it that the average person notices about the back to basics team, were you guys to get a majority and be able to have your way in the council most of the time?
From my perspective, it'll be the lesser known things. So it'll be if we can get the support of the other independent councillors to get the majority support of the back to basics ticket, it'll be the omission of a great deal, many of potholes. And it's a sort of thing that, rather than like flying a rainbow flag that's very visible, that doesn't actually achieve much, if we can cut down the amount of potholes in the road by half, it won't be something to make a song and dance about, but it'll just be the removal of negative impacts to people's daily lives.
Okay, well, I mean that's a good start. And what would be the number, like the top? We've mentioned obviously some of the virtue signaling stuff. So they're commenting on foreign wars, supporting things like The Voice, which in theory should be up to each individual person on how they vote and whatnot. Things like this. So that's, I'm assuming, number one of the ticket of what people don't want to see, the reason you guys have won election. What other things that are maybe a little bit more pervasive or maybe a little bit further under the surface are you guys looking to eliminate from council that have previously been there?
Joel, did you want to take that, or you want me to?
I'll do some special comments after, maybe.
Yeah. For me, it's the wasteful spending. So if you compare like for like councils, we've got a situation where similar councils spend around $10 million less on staff per year. So we've
how does that come about? How is it that they're spending so much more?
Policy. So it's not like an individual councillor or a councillor group will want. We want a gender equity officer. We want a something else officer. That officer role will be generated as a byproduct of the policy that they've supported. Right. So if that's an inclusion policy that results in a particular job, that comes at a cost. And
Sorry, is it so corrupt that like then the job ends up being someone that maybe is handpicked or has a relationship or was lined up by the councillors who voted in this policy? Is it quite that corrupt?
I don't think it, I don't think it's inherently corrupt. It's just, so corruption comes with a degree of competence. And I don't think there's that high degree of competence to run a corrupt process like that. I think it comes from a genuine goodwill of individuals on council to support policy that they think is going to benefit things. But the problem is that it's often driven by the heart and not the head, and it results in spending that I think is largely unnecessary and takes away from those core services.
Yeah, of course. And so you mentioned, so spending $10 million ish more than like councils.
And that's just on staff. And there's a whole bunch of other areas. So what it's going to take is a majority of councillors to understand that if they want to continue down the path that the status quo has set, one, it's going to continue to cost us more and more money. It's going to make things harder for local residents. And it's going to mean that the backlog of our asset renewal continues to build. And that is going to result in a continuing decrease in the community satisfaction of council, which is already under 50%. So we're already failing. It's just going to mean we're going to fail even more.
Is that uncommonly low, less than 50% satisfaction in your council, or is that across the board?
Across the board, it ranges 40 to 60%. But what is often used by officers is the fact that because we're better than others at 46%, we should be happy. But to me, you're a teacher. What do you class as a pass? 50%, 75%, or 100%?
Well, I'm a bad example because the school where I teach, they lowered it to 40% as a pass. So
what?
Yeah, it used to be 50. 50 is pretty standard as the pass mark. And then I mean, obviously passing is just not having to repeat the grade or not being not permitted to do VCE, which is why they lowered the threshold, right? But generally 50% is a pass mark.
That is insane. 40%. So even if we use 50% as the benchmark, we're failing in our
overall you would direction. Pass at my school. At my school, Surf Coast Council would be passing with not flying colours, but with a nice 6% buffer. So
yeah. But what I'd love to change that to is 75%. Like, no one's going to please everyone all the time, but what we can do is aim to take the least amount of money from people, but of that money, spend it to support the most amount of people, where I don't think that's been happening.
Yeah. Joel, did you have any to add to that? So the question originally was, what aspects of the previous council's goings on would you most like to eliminate? So we've mentioned money, we've mentioned the work stuff. Anything further that?
Probably not anything in addition to that, but the money side of it is the big thing, especially when there's projects that community want to do. Like in the Winchelsea ward, there's 2 major tree planting projects that they want to get done on in council land, but council prefers to instead pay, I think it's $250,000 a year on a carbon credit scheme. So, and that's going internationally on international projects. So it's not even staying within the Shire. So if we can redirect that sort of money on projects that the community actually does want and still probably achieve the same outcomes, then that's what I want to try and see is better outcomes for people's money.
Yeah, and I mean that leads pretty well into the next question I was going to ask. So if you had to list some specific examples of things you would like to achieve within your first term in council, I don't know, is maybe this tree planting one's not top of your list? What would be top of your list of things you would like to achieve if everything goes to plan and the others go with you?
Well, it's all based around the money aspect, I guess. Is trying to keep rates from going up too high, delivering better outcomes for the community, and yeah, just I guess the big thing that I keep hearing is the whole identity politics. That's what people want gone from local government. So yeah.
Is there any possibility of like a lowering of rates or something like that? Is that like doable considering the costs of function as it exists, or you might not know. I mean, you haven't even stepped
in the door
role
yet.
so maybe I'm asking a little bit ahead of myself.
I can take that.
Maybe Paul knows better. Yes,
it's possible, but I don't think there's a broad enough appetite to cut as hard as is needed to make that a reality.
Okay.
Because like for a lot of people, they're new to the environment. They've been around on council for a term, and they've got a belief that government can do great things, but all government can do is take from people. And in time, I think we could reduce rates. Maybe not with this current councillor group, though.
Yeah. Well, who knows, right? How they end up lining up, because that's what I see as like this would be an enormous I guess, a signal that what you guys are doing is working and is positive. Is imagine if, like, all around us, we hear about inflation, we hear about rising cost of living, we hear about this, that, and the other. We're expecting prices to go up, let alone rates, which have been going up anyway. So, I mean, imagine if a council, not necessarily yours, but any council, the rates don't go up but go down. I would be ecstatic as a ratepayer. You'd be thinking, what are they doing? This is incredible. How are they get more of those people in? So, I mean, that'd be a great signal. Obviously, we would love to do that, but whether it's possible or not is the ultimate question. So what I'm seeing, what I kind of the vibe I'm getting a little bit is that Surf Coast Shire, in and of itself, there is nothing like it was a Greens Labor stronghold in council. I think in state and federal elections, does it generally flip between the two, or is it a safe seat? I think Corangamite used to be a real knife edge seat. Paul, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily anything about the demographic of the people in the area which suggests that there should be such a strong back to basics return to people being elected. I would say it's more the fact that you guys have mobilized and you've organized and you've mobilized well enough to get yourselves into these positions and to make yourselves known so that the community does eventually pick you. But there's no reason that this couldn't happen elsewhere, given your example, from what I can perceive. So, I mean, we are the furthest away from council elections that will be again, so it's probably not the best time to try and inspire people who look at you and see your example. What kind of advice would you guys give if someone wants to do the same thing in their council area to gain that stronghold of 3 or 4 councillors that are like-minded?
I would say just start working together as soon as you can. So what the Back to Basics ticket was born out of was different political backgrounds, no political background, having discussions on what we each value, having discussions with the community, because that's one of the most important elements of policy development, not just what you think, but what the community thinks. And by combining those and working out where our overlap is and running with that I think is the single most important thing, because it's all about working with people. And if you can work together on shared goals, I'd be happy to work with communists or whatever. If there was a cross, I don't know what commonality libertarians and communists have, but if there was that crossover, I'd be happy to work with them. And if you can do that from an early stage and develop the networks over time, that will then make the election period so much easier because you'll have a known brand. Whereas like the Back to Basics group, we only had about 3 months of solid campaigning, which is a relatively short amount of time. So a lot of people wouldn't have known of us until they picked up their VEC papers and then went to vote.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got an enormous advantage in that if libertarians work with non-libertarians on an issue and are in close proximity enough and have enough discussions about philosophy, we have the enormous advantage that we are actually correct. And so eventually we are more likely to have them come over to our side than we are ever likely to go over to their side.
I'd challenge that correct. I'd challenge that we are more principled. Because the trade-off that we are willing to accept is to accept personal responsibility, where a lot of others don't want to accept that personal responsibility. And that's where we shine long term.
Yeah, but I mean, also objectively, when it comes to free markets and the ways to run the economy and all those things, we are correct. I mean, that I think there can be no argument of. I mean, that's what I think. You feel free to disagree. We are libertarians. Do what you want.
Just don't harm anyone.
Yes, just don't harm anyone. Okay, well, so the question I'd originally asked was any advice to people who wanted to organise in a similar way. Joel, did you have anything to add to Paul's comments?
I would say get to know your current councillors better, and then by that extension, you'll form groups and you can get involved and like I did with Paul, figure out what's going on in your own council, and don't be afraid to. I think we were the only group that actually had any form of a policy platform that we had in writing, and I think when you show the majority of people what you're going to stand for, they're in agreement with that because it's in our case, I think fairly sensible policies, and they know that there's a defined goal that you're wanting to achieve in council. And if you state that pretty clearly, then I think you'll find that most people will accept what you're trying to do. As was the case with us.
Yeah, one thing I will add to that is that you need to get as many candidates as you can field. So we ran 4 candidates and got 3 elected. If we ran 8 candidates, we could have got 5 or 6 elected. So that would dramatically change things. So I know there's a lot of people that consider running and then don't. But if you can have more people that are not so sure about running, actually running, what that positions the group to do, and this is what the left have done well for decades, is the left work with each other on councils, they'll dominate tickets, and then the preference flows will result in strong left councils. And that's what we've seen across the state for decades and decades, where what the Back to Basics case study has shown is that it doesn't take a lot of people to shift the entire direction of council. But if you can get more than a few people, you stand to more easily shift the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, even just voting for council this year, the enormous difference, the enormous advantage, I suppose, that normal non-major party people have in council is that there isn't everyone's kind of on a level plane. There's no advantage to spending an enormous amount more money. I mean, I suppose no one spends that much more money. Yeah. And everyone's kind of on the same playing field. Most people don't mention whether they're aligned, and often there are no people who mention at all any major parties on the sheet. So everyone kind of judges on the basis of that little spiel.
200 words.
200 words, and that's all there is to it. And in a way, that is a huge advantage to people who aren't part of the big money, because there's no little Labor written underneath anyone's name that tells them, oh well, I'm a Labor voter, I'm going to vote for them number one every time. You concur. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you, you can dig and find that information, but yeah, often it's not readily available.
Yeah, and we know most voters, not just in council, in all elections, are low information voters. They're not even going to do the homework to dig. That's already too much. So yeah, that's very much true. Was there anything that you fellas think that I've missed that you think is important that should be mentioned about council, about the Surf Coast Shire, about the Back to Basics team, about what the future could hold? Is there anything that you guys think is worth mentioning?
I can lead with that. A phrase that I live by: if not you, then who? If not now, then when? And my answers to that is me and now. A lot of people will say someone else later, but by doing that, that reduces the amount of control that you have over your life. If people want to adopt that, go for it. If they don't, they can choose that too.
And you know what? Those words have rung through this podcast a few times. I reckon you finish with that at least one or two other times. So it's good. We're drilling it in. Like with teaching, you got to repeat, repetition.
Yes.
Joel, anything I've missed?
Couldn't top that. That's a great closer.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gents, for your time. All the best. I mean, I don't think it's the hardest part that's over. I think the hardest part is yet to come. So all the best with your endeavours in council, both yourselves and Rebecca, the other member of the Back to Basics team. And hey, hopefully we do see again, knock on every piece of wood you can find, a mayor that sports the libertarian ethos. So thank you very much, fellas.
Thanks, Pietro.
Cheers, Pietro. DFTBA.
You didn't, you know what? You said that at the end of the last time, and then I ended the recording before you explained it. I'm going to make you explain it this time.
That's a choice for viewers and listeners to look up. And if they want to follow that mantra, they are welcome to do so.
All right. Ever the enigma, Paul. All right. If you don't already, you can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and X. Thank you very much, fellas. We will catch you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Yes, bye.